Right then. So, over to Jeff to give us his short review of the episode, short synopsis of the episode. And I'll show the screen. Oops, I'm a little bit late. I'm going to have to...
Oh, that's okay. All it says is, Eve learns more about humans while guarding a young girl and her mother, who is to testify against her accountant husband's mobster employers.
Wow.
So, as we look at the photos here, I can maybe think of a little bit more to say about what happened, but there's sort of the two-pronged thing going on through it, because Mann is attracted to the mother, so there's kind of that situation going on, and possibly first feelings of jealousy from Eve. So she does certain things in response to that, and they discuss that. But meanwhile, also Eve is getting to know the little girl, the daughter, and so she has sort of forms of friendship with her as well, and can both tell her things and learn from her. So yeah.
So Jeff, I know you have just a little bit of an interpolation, but I didn't want to sort of forget about it. And is that you've got high standards when it comes to kids in TV shows. So what did you think of this kid in this show?
I thought she was pretty good, actually. And I've seen better, but she was certainly passable. Did a good job in the part, I thought, overall.
And also, not just from an acting point of view, but you have a lot to say when it comes to the kinds of things that kids say in shows, especially sitcoms.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the interesting thing, again, always with this, because you got the running thing of it's supposedly set in the future, because they don't do a whole lot of like what the actual trendy things are, because I don't think they want to focus too much on that, and because it requires too much future prediction. But like in this picture, she's playing a Game Gear, but there's no line about it being an ancient piece of technology or anything.
Yeah, it should be.
Like, is it the equivalent of us playing the Atari now? Because we can still do that, of course. So it's possible that the Sega Game Gear would be the popular retro thing at this.
That's all they have to put it in. Hey, leave me alone, Mum. I like retro. Something like that.
Yeah, right. And we also had a line where she mentioned going to the movie Wayne's World 5.
That was good. I like that.
Of course, we...
I wrote
we
on
never
there.
got past a second Wayne's World, actually, but that was fun.
I put if only.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, of course, there's an action... So I actually kind of respected them for most of the action scenes don't take place until the climax, so they kind of did a better job of building to that instead of trying to kind of force it throughout the episode. Though we still had some intense scenes, like the one where the hitman guy or henchman guy just strolls into the police station and gets past everybody to to threaten the mother again. And also, of course, the scenes with the girl riding around on the scooter. So this police station is not real big on security and protocol.
So, Jeff, you're an 80s person. Do you know what that is? The name of this vehicle.
Well, it says She-Devil, so I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, but apart from that, do you know where it's actually from?
No.
So what that is a Sinclair C5, which was released in 1985 in Britain by the inventor and probable ENTP Clive Sinclair, and he had the Sinclair range of computers. Now, they really should have done some market research, because these are they. And it's become a bit of a cult item. We'll get on to Beth Toussaint or whatever she's called in a moment, but that's some stuff there about it becoming a cult. If I press that and then then people can sort of like pause it and read it themselves, especially if I go like this for a moment, if they want to pause it. And then I'll go back. Oops, go back to that one. And just a little bit here. So ENTP thought that people would like go around in these things, in these little cars. Well, not even cars. It's like a battery-assisted pedal bike thing. And so I'm wondering how they got one over to America, to a real Sinclair C5. And so here, like I said, they built a whole factory. They made 14,000. They should have done their research, their market research. Like before they launched the iPhone publicly, they had a load of people testing it out and made them sign non-disclosure agreements to make it perfect or as good as possible before it was released. And then I'll just read this for the audience before I move on. Its sales prospects were blighted by poor reviews and safety concerns expressed by consumer and motoring organizations. The vehicle's limitations, a short range, a maximum speed of only 15 miles per hour, a battery that ran down quickly, and lack of weatherproofing made it impractical for most people's needs. Now, it may have been more if it was like legal for people to use it on sidewalks. That might have been better, but I'll just say there's a bit on Beth Toussaint. I don't know how her name's pronounced. Oh, and there's the two side by side. I don't need to say that. I apologize. All right. You've got the same like handlebars here, and there's like the cutout. What was that? Oh yeah, and that the game when the Game Gear was released. Some ENTP wannabe or whatever. Let's put a jet engine on there and make it actually go quick. Oh yeah, and then I've got something around here which shows the innards of the Sinclair C5. So there's one for all the NTPs and ISTPs out there. I want to see the inside of the thing that the little girl was on. Right, so I will go back to where we were with her, somewhere around here. Yeah, I thought the picture was better, well, at least on the version I had this week.
Yeah, the picture's slightly better, but also the sound not great in some spots.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, I originally thought that they've maybe processed Eve's voice, but listening to Yancey Butler and other things, and yeah, it sounds like they've not processed. Oh, I'll just leave that there to some. So it looks like somebody took this particular recording off the Sci-Fi Channel,
yeah,
or something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other ones, like the previous episode, was pretty bad quality, and I had a herringbone pattern sort of thing on mine. I thought that might be paid off or something, like someone taking a green pill, but no, it was just a random green pill taken. So I have some points to make, and some of these you might find stimulating, or I'll just let you, if you see something, Jeff, just feel free to jump in. I thought this episode was a good example of like mature artisan for Bobby, especially the bit towards the end, you know, where he's like with the bit where like the stuff with the family in order to bring the man around, but it wasn't just a tactic. He actually felt that should be the case in terms of those sort of staying a family unit. I like the line early on from Eve. No, 3 minutes for the cursing ritual that follows. And then it seems to be a phrase. I'm getting a bad feeling here from Bobby. And I wondered if that's similar. Is there a phrase in Star Wars, I'm getting a bad feeling about this? That might be one.
Yeah, I think Han Solo says that.
Yeah. And we had another posh English villain. I remember one from the second episode. Was the one in the first as well?
No, I mean in this one, who was the English villain?
Well, I'm gonna have to pause it and find out. There's a guy towards the end. He had a posh accent, a little bit of a Rada accent. He was towards the end.
I don't remember him. I didn't think. I mean, I remember the guy, but I didn't think he was supposed to be English. But you know,
this guy. He sounds English to me. This guy. No,
you say so. I just didn't remember that. I think as the villain, you know, through the main thing, they were like Spanish or Mexican or something.
Yeah, Batista, that name. I'll go a bit. Oh, where are we up to? I think we're around here in the slides. I thought some of the camera direction was pretty darn good for television because they don't have as much time in television. So usually I don't see direction this good in a television series of that era. Perhaps they had more time because they knew they were shooting it as a mid-season replacement, but we don't. We sort of touched on this last time that we don't know how much time they had for their stories. There was a weird bit about Eve's counting when she was coming. It didn't seem to be in real time because that 20 seconds.
Right,
they stretched that time a bit.
Lasted too long,
yeah. They stretched that time a bit. I mentioned the Sinclair C5. Yeah, ISTP little girl, maybe. And then I put I did this one before. Wayne's World 5, if only. Oh yes, and I thought there was a good line from the little girl when she tells the story of, and that's what gives Eve the idea of like going out, hunting out, then coming back. She tells Eve that she left her childhood boyfriend, so to speak, with this other girl, and she came back and saw them holding hands. And I liked her follow-up line. I asked my dad how much it would cost to bump off a couple of kids. So yeah, I like that. So what do you think about the Bobby's maturity thing?
Yeah, well, they already established that he's he's more mature than some people in previous episodes. So he's still an opportunist, but he definitely evaluates the situation before he jumps into things some of the time. So he's not depicted as just sort of reckless, loose cannon guy.
Yeah, which is what you get with a lot of sort of like STP characters. He's not Mike Hammer.
Right, but we still got the part like at the beginning where they're talking about how he's always late to the point that that Eve is timed out exactly. His each part of his trip. Why he ends up late because of all the things that happen to him every day, and then he doesn't listen to the briefing memo or whatever that he was sent. So he says when she asks him if he listened to it, well, not all of it.
But isn't he at this point living in her place because his house blew up? And so wouldn't it be easier if they just went to work at the same time?
Well, I don't know. They didn't specifically mention that, so you don't know whether this one was written before the other one or what,
Yeah.
because there's no specific mention of that. So they do make a brief mention of one earlier discussion that they had about people having children. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot of each episode is kind of self-contained in terms of not a lot of references to previous stuff, which is what I told my mother when she was watching with me, as before she watched it. I'm like, didn't really have to know a lot to understand what's going on, because it's not a continuing series, really.
And that's like one of the benefits. So, for example, I invited Cynthia, and like all she would, in order to catch up, is like if she just watched the first episode and the episode we were covering, that would be pretty much enough to be up to speed.
So I basically gave her a quick rundown of the first episode without really having to go into a lot of detail, and she was able to figure it out. But I actually thought I liked Eve's dialogue in this episode better than in some previous ones, especially the conversations between her and the daughter, because it made sense for her to be talking. It was sort of like that same thing that they've talked about with Doctor Who, where they wanted to have a companion that had to have things explained to them, because it's sort of like you're explaining to the audience at the same time.
Yep.
And so we had some of that where she's being basic in her explanations because she's talking to a child, but it sort of served as her also explaining these things to the audience at the same time. So
yeah, and there was a good joke at the end when she called him Dad.
Yeah. So you retain the sort of kind of playful banter that they have between each other about things, and including even the part where they were talking about jealousy and stuff. Is I thought that it didn't it wasn't cheesy. They kind of kept it to here's sort of he even says, you learn things by observing the people around you. So you've sort of learned how to become jealous. And she sort of considers it like, oh, I guess he's right.
Do you think if it was the same people, but say it was written by different people, I don't know. I wasn't keeping track, but the writers that wrote the previous episode, maybe they should have shown them this one and said, do it like this.
Well, according to the credits, it was the same writers, but I think a different director, if I remember right. But
I mean, even the way the humor was handled better in this episode than the previous one. But that might have been certain problems where they weren't maybe they knew they didn't quite have a good main plot on their hands in the previous episode, and so they expanded the comedy scenes, and maybe they sort of like dragged out certain of the beats. And so I think we mentioned last time that those comedy scenes could have been like cut in half, truncated, and it would have been better.
To me, it was less the comedy scenes and just like the scenes that were almost sort of an interlude in the middle of the other stuff that was going on, and having the insane guy, like he was like too efficient in terms of they had to try to do too many things with him over the course of a short period of time, instead of sort of building to a one kind of payoff. And this one did a better job, I thought, of building it over the course of the episode and then having the action climax, as opposed to trying to squeeze in a whole bunch of intense scenes along the way. And I also thought the woman playing the FBI agent, or double agent, was pretty good. Like, she was effective in her performance.
Oh yes, if you just contrast her character with that sort of like the one that annoyed me with the psychiatrist. Yeah, the psychologist. That was like too much of a plot device.
Right.
Yeah.
To once again use the Blake 7 reference, she was more Provine like. It was somebody who's believable in that role, because it's like she's just effective at doing stuff and doesn't waste time with a bunch of extraneous things that don't make any sense or don't add anything to it.
No. Right then.
Like the scene where she's driving the woman, she says, I thought we were going downtown. Or why are we going to the beach? And she doesn't waste time trying to come up with some fake explanation. She just takes her gun out and says, "Does this answer your question?"
Well, she might be STP. Yeah. So, do you think what if you were typing the little girl? Have you got enough data to make a typing or at least
not really, but I would say she doesn't come. She comes off as being utilitarian.
Yeah.
I'd say that. And of course, a lot of kids do, but I mean, she doesn't. Most of what she says is sort of about just sort of reacting to what happens in life and figuring out how to do something. And then, of course, she takes action herself when she decides to go find her father herself.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's good for like have sort of like every now and then like have these sort of atypical female roles in that like certain types that you don't get to, the certain female Jungian types that we don't, Jung Kersey types that we don't get to see that often in TV because they sort of get pegged in certain roles. So it's refreshing that sort of like the sort of less common types show up.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I know sometimes you bagged on the acting and stuff, or even I have, but I mean, the soap operas, one of the positives they have is that they tend to, because they are so character driven a lot of the time, you do see more of that where you see characters that are less represented show up in soap operas.
Oh yeah, I mean, because of what I'm working on at the moment, like yeah, I mean, television is much more character driven than the movies. Because you could,
I don't think all television is, but usually the better ones are.
Yeah. Yes. So, for instance, Homicide: Life on the Streets.
Yeah.
But that had the benefit of like being based on real people or combinations of real people,
yeah.
and like them having the book and the setting and like all of that sort of like their base material being rich. I still think though, looking back, that Munch could have been funnier. Maybe Belzer could have worked in a bit more of his act.
I think it was probably a conscious thing to limit that because it was a tendency of him probably to fall back on that, and they wanted to have other facets of the character, not just have him be comic relief. When he moved over to SVU, I think in the earliest episodes they kind of just had him as the comic relief and the office guy, and then after a while they started actually working him more into the actual cases.
Yeah, I can't imagine, because I don't really want to see the program because of the subject matter, but I can't really believe like how like that character sort of fits into that sort of program in terms of tone. Because like if you're going from like one of these hardcore sort of like, again, special victims case, and then you've got someone who's joking around, I just think tonally that'd be a difficult thing to pull off.
Yeah, well, I've really only seen the earliest ones, and in those, they pretty much do that by restricting his scenes to being in the office when the cops are just talking to each other.
Yeah.
So, and it's sort of like that's a little bit more, it fits the conversation because they're not always serious in the office, at the police station and stuff. But when they're actually getting into talking to victims or suspects or anything, then he's usually not there. So because they focus on the main detective duo of that show.
Yeah. Hang on a moment. I've just noticed an extra mistake here. Well, here he looks like he's got his hand on her arse. And also Eve was, if this is meant to be Eve's point of view, that's not right because she wasn't stood there. She was stood over here. So her angle should be from the side.
Well, no, that's isn't that on that's the video?
Yeah, but I also
So,
think there was
I don't
showing
think.
back. I think they plugged her in, and they were going like what she saw
Well,
there.
no,
Now,
but it was the video recording, like surveillance camera in the office.
yeah, I mean, I allow for that possibility. Yeah, that, and then they quickly, but then they also during that scene, like she was sort of like hooked up, and it's like it's got the thing like with RoboCop, where she can just sort of play back what she saw.
Yeah, I think so, but that's not what they were actually watching. They were watching the surveillance camera tape.
Yeah, that's true. I think they probably maybe combine the two, but yes,
And
I'll
one thing I was trying to remember to mention that reminded me of, because when afterwards when he asked her why did she
ah
put the tape to set to play that, she said it was a miscue.
yeah
And then later when she does the thing where she counts to 20 and comes back because she quote unquote forgot her purse, I liked the fact that they
right
didn't have Mann say anything. You just sort of
right
saw the look on his face, like he knows that she made that up, or she left the purse on purpose, but he's not going to say anything.
yeah
And I half thought he would. I expected him to say something like another miscue, but then I was actually liked the choice to not have him say the
yeah
line, but just give her a look.
yeah yeah. It's one of those things like if you can convey it through a look, don't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but this bit, do you think this bit is Eve's point of view that's been recorded when she saw? Because she did see the man and like look at him.
No, I think it was supposed to be still more footage from the cameras in the station.
Okay, because I remember that she did look at him.
Right, but she just sort of glanced at him as he walked past, and this was like an actual angle from the camera.
Yeah.
Because this is all part of the tape they were playing back, the same, like, file of footage or whatever.
Okay. Okay. I'll give you that, but the hand seems to have moved. But then again, it might have been cut off. But that's a bit of a stretch. So here we go. I'll resume. So overall, I think that this was better written than the previous episode, certainly, and some of the previous ones as well. What helped my enjoyment in this is, well, first of all, this is probably the best picture out of the episodes that I've seen, because the other ones were taken off VHS, and this one was taken off. I think they may actually mention the Sci-Fi Channel towards the end, and it helps that you've got a good-looking actress here. So, and I like the little girl character, not just because she was like, they do her as an ISTP kind of child, and I like the interaction with, and again, it's that theme of, it's not so much the plot, it's the effect of the plot on Eve and Eve's reaction to the sort of like the themes of the episode that I liked. And I thought the humor was not as heavy-handed as in the previous episode, where it was like, this is much. It's almost as if like you felt that they might put the comedy music sound effects on. This is like sort of like signaling too much. Hey, this is a funny scene. They did that once in Babylon 5, and J. Michael Straczynski said
that actress was on Babylon 5.
yes, yes, and yeah, we might as well put up a bit about her. There she is. And J. Michael Straczynski said he had a word with Christopher Franke, and he won't be doing it again. Because again, they had that. Because it rarely works where they have the sort of like where it's a sort of comedy scene, and for some reason, like they having the comedy music from composers. I've never really heard any sort of like comedy music over a scene and thought this really adds to the scene. It's it's like it usually detracts.
I would say
it.
Benny Hill. Benny Hill.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. That's probably the only one that springs to mind for me. Well, after you said it.
Yeah. Maybe some really old stuff that, of course, some of what Benny Hill based that stuff on, the old, some of the old silent movies where they would just play music because you didn't have dialogue, the Charlie Chaplin type, old school stuff.
He had some good sketches in the, they once had a television program where they took the best Benny Hill, maybe the top 10 Benny Hill sketches, in their opinion, and they showed it to an audience of Little Britain, and the Little Britain audience liked it. I think recently Little Britain has been cancelled because they think it's politically incorrect. So
I don't know anything about that. So
I once heard that, and I think in the last few weeks, a sort of a reference to, because have you ever seen Little Britain?
No, like I said, I don't know anything. I don't know what it is.
Well, the voiceover on the series was by Tom Baker, and it sort of starred Matt Lucas and David Williams. That's pretty much it. And I think it started in about 2004. So, as for points in this episode, there's certain kinds of plot that sort of like don't interest me that much, just because of they're sort of like the genre of the plot that they are, and it's like, how much do you like that genre? I mean, like, there's some people out there who sort of like will watch any sort of horror movie of any quality because they love horror movies, and it's the same thing with science fiction. And it's like they'll watch even bad science fiction just because they love science fiction that much. And so where it's with this, and it's sort of a sort of detective, sort of procedural kind of thing. And also quite a few of the things that happened in here just made me think, this is so 1990s. Like with the kinds of villains that they had in the sharp suits and like a little bit of saxophone in the background. And it's like, I sort of seen that sort of thing so many times. But Shannon Worry didn't pop up. More's the pity. So those kind of... So it's like, I have to sort of like... Again, I sort of go with your principle of overall enjoyment value. And so it's like when they have like these scenes early on with like the stuff with Batista and all of this kind of stuff was sort of like didn't interest me as much, because it's like, hey, get back to Mann and Eve.
I agree. They sort of bordered on the cartoonish in terms of the villains. Not too bad, but just sort of like, I was actually reminded of in the Superman radio show, it's almost 100% of the time, the better stories in the Superman radio show are the ones where they don't have scenes with the villain or villains until they have to. And it's like most of the story, they don't know who is behind whatever is going on. And that's part of it, is finding it out. And so there's a confrontation later in the story. But there's also other stories where, even in the first or second episode of that particular story, they'll cut to a scene where it's just the villains like in their hideout talking to each other. And I always think those are the weaker stories, because when you give too much of that perspective and it's not very strong, it's just sort of like typical comic book villain type dialogue, it drags down the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt that way about this, like not extremely, but as those scenes were happening, I'm like, this would be more effective if we actually didn't see the mobsters talking to each other. Then that scene, think about the scene where the guy comes in and actually goes in and threatens the mother again. That would have been more effective if we hadn't already had the scenes with that guy talking about it.
Yeah, and where they actually tell you that that's going to happen.
Right, yeah. So I think that would have been, because it would have been a shock to the audience as well, more so than it was.
Yeah, whereas when you're told that it's going to happen, it's like you're then waiting for it to happen, and then it sort of drags.
Yeah, maybe
you're waiting for it.
You maybe even don't show the guy's face when he comes in the police station, but you just maybe see him from the back, and you hear the line where he says he wants to report a stolen car. So at that point, you're not thinking anything about who that guy is, really. It's just sort of an incidental thing, and then after the fact, you figure out who he is.
Yeah, and so what you're saying there about the Superman thing, and also this, is that there's that thing of you really want the audience, I mean, in this kind of show, to follow it from the point of view of the lead characters, and also on a series, like sometimes the lead cast have like egos, and like they want to make sure that most of the time is on them rather than the writer coming up with their own character and spending time on this
it's almost guest character. Better to do it that way, with rare exception. Like you had that one homicide episode where they really focused on the perspective of the guy that was stalking.
Is it Gas Man? The Gas Man.
And that was done effectively. And I think at the time I pointed out, I almost wanted them to do even more that way, like that they, in terms of the way they did the finish. But I think that was one where their original intentions, the network sort of stepped in and said, well, you still need to have the main people in it more or something, so they kind of ended up with a compromise. It wasn't quite as good, but in general, if you're not doing something like that, where it's just sort of the switching things up in terms of the focus, and to me, the example of doing that even more effectively was my favorite episode of Homicide, Bop Gun, the one where Robin Williams plays the husband of the victim, because the entire focus of the episode is not from his perspective, but they did more in that episode to focus on sort of the family of the victim and what they were going through, which they didn't. There's certain episodes along the way they did that more than others, and that can be effective. But again, it has to be done right. And like you say, when you just sort of have these one-off villains that you've never seen before, these scenes are not really as good.
Yeah. And also, there's also the issue of, if you do have a villain that's really, really, really good, there's the danger of seeing the episode from the villain's point of view, and that reducing the point of view of going with the lead characters, and that's more of a danger. So I'm not so sure about that, but it's just a sort of a lead into a point that Robert McKee made in his book Story, which is like the full title, The Substance, Structure, Style, and Principles of Screenwriter. And he mentions here about Blade Runner, marketing positioned the audience to empathize with Harrison Ford's Rick Deckard. But once in the theater, filmgoers were drawn to the greater dimensionality of the replicant Roy Batty, Rutger Hauer. As the center of goods shifted to the antagonist, the audience's emotional confusion diminished its enthusiasm, and what should have been a huge success became a cult film. So maybe there is that thing of, as you said, like, only spend as much time with the villains as necessary.
Yeah, because... and the two things that I thought, again, I mentioned before, but I'm just going to restate them because to me they're the biggest flaws in the episode, besides what we were just talking about, was in this, what has been established to be an even more authoritarian society in the future. I didn't buy that the guy would be able to so easily henchmen to get in to threaten the woman, and also that the girl would just be able to ride her scooter all around the police station with, everybody just kind of being like, oh, okay, that's fine, to the point that she was even able to escape from there. Like those in the, if we'd established in previous episodes or something that the opposite was true, that was more of a kind of, Wild West type of society where there was more lawlessness, then I could buy it a little more. But it seems like we've established the opposite, that things are more locked down, and then we have scenes like that where it's sort of like, well, in order for this to work for plot convenience, you have to accept that they just allowed this to happen. It just doesn't seem very realistic.
Yeah. Or if you had a world where everyone was softer, sort of more namby-pamby, and not got the assertiveness to stop that kind of artisan behavior, then...
But no, we had episodes like the one with the old guy that was the ex-cop, that said that they basically were even very heavily in control of people's medical care, and giving them new organs whether they liked it or not.
Yeah,
things like that makes me think that the security aspects would be tighter than what they had in this episode.
Yeah, so it's like maybe there's a sort of a tonal thing where it's a crime series, and so they will sort of want to make it dark from that point of view, but maybe certain aspects of the future they want to sort of make positive, and so maybe it's a bit like there's a sort of political correctness with the police where they might not want to be afraid of tackling a little girl, and in case they get sued or something.
Yeah, maybe it would have been nice to, if they were going to do that, to have some sort of dialogue to indicate it rather than being left that way. I did like they don't seem too far off with their implication of tobacco being illegal in the future, because it seems like we're probably headed in that direction. Slowly, eventually.
And that made me think at the time that constitutionally they've not got the power to ban tobacco, and they didn't even have the power to ban alcohol, and had to pass an amendment in order to do it.
With tobacco, they've done it in small increments. It's like rather than actually ban tobacco itself, they've just passed more and more things to restrict the industry and what they're allowed to sell and what they have to do, how they do it.
Yeah, and also because
more taxes, of course.
Yeah, they could just put the tariffs up really, really high to a point where it's $100.
Well, they even had a line where she said something about she was only smoking 10% tobacco.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a law in terms of you're allowed to have a certain amount of it, but that's it.
Yeah, but then you'll get and of course what you have now, it's you've got to have the wheat tobacco, but really, really strong weed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, so I'll give it about 7 out of 10.
I would also give it 7 out of 10.
I think last week, did I give it 6 and you gave it 5?
No, I think I also gave it 6.
Was that Kappa 2?
Well, The Last Man in the Machine, I think we both gave a 6, if I remember right.
Right, okay, yeah. It might have been Kappa 2 last time. That was the bit where she called him Dad.
2 is 6 also. I don't think I've given either one of these shows a 5 yet.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I liked his reaction when...
I don't remember, actually. Yeah, because The Last Man in the Machine was the one with the psycho dude that was out to get revenge on Mann. So, yeah, I think I gave it a 6, which I'm pretty sure has been the lowest score I've given either show yet. So.
All right, then. So...
It managed to hold my attention. That's the number. That's the first thing you got to do is if I start to drift off... Which there have been, I think last week in both shows, the last two, there were slight moments where I started to lose interest, but it wasn't long stretches. So
Oh.
that's kind of like the next threshold. For something to be a 5, there has to be like a discernible stretch where I just wasn't interested in it.
Oh, I never asked. What did you think of this actress, Beth Toussaint? And
She's all right. She has that look to her where I'm like, she looks familiar. And when I look up her career, I'm thinking, well, I probably did see her in a few things, but it just seems like there's something, she made more of an impression for something. It just wasn't.
Apparently, she's been in a few soaps.
Yeah.
When I looked on Wikipedia.
And a lot of guest starring roles on TV shows. So she was on Star Trek The Next Generation and Babylon 5 and Melrose Place and Matlock and The Commish and things like that. Cheers, 21 Jump Street. So she's Growing Pains, Dallas. She actually had a recurring role in Dallas. So I never really watched much of that. But anyway. But yeah, she's got one of those faces that you sort of remember, even if you don't remember from where.
Right then. So I won't ask for points. So yeah. So to recap, I give it 7, and I think Jeff gives it 7 as well.
Yep.
So then I'm going to end the broadcast.
All right. So join us next week for. I had it pulled up and then I lost
episode 8.
Yeah, I forgot the name.
One moment. I think $1 Billion Baby.
There you go. Join us for $1 Billion Baby.
Is that a reference to a film, $1 Million Baby? And I think there was a film called that in the 30s. Maybe Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe so. I end the broadcast.
All right. See you.